The Edmonton Oilers have forced a Game 7 in their second-round series with the Vancouver Canucks. Nick Zararis is here to talk about that and what we should expect in Game 7. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here. Welcome, everybody, to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Oilers, Nick Zararis. And Nick, big win in Game 6. What was the big difference in this pretty one-sided game, at least at the end?
The Oilers didn't get killed in their own zone. That's generally how these games have gone back and forth and why they've swung so dramatically one way or the other. No one's won 2 in a row in this series yet. And it's largely because when the Canucks have had their forecheck going, the Oilers are just in their own zone for 45 seconds, a minute and a half at a time. And last night, the Oilers were able to get out quickly. And some of that is having the benefit of last change, being able to take advantage of some more hard matchups that you would. That's also been a real noticeable theme in this series, is that the team that gets the matchups they prefer has generally fared better. It's not hard and fast. There have been situations like in Game 5, for example, Edmonton had McDavid, Draisaitl, and Hyman on the ice for both of the goals against that Vancouver had. So not hard and fast, but you combine getting out of your own zone cleanly. Stuart Skinner didn't have to do a whole lot. The Canucks just couldn't get a lot going last night offensively. I think they finished with 15 shots on goal, something like that. So you combine all of that together, and frankly, the Canucks did them a favor. Like, if we're going to be frank, the Canucks didn't play great last night. And sure, the Oilers have to convert those opportunities and score, but the Canucks just didn't look good last night. And you get all of that together, we're going to get a lopsided result like that. And what's been a very close series.
You know, you mentioned 15 shots on goal. Beyond the forecheck, is Edmonton doing anything exceptionally well in their own zone defensively?
I think they've really they've accepted that they're not going to win a lot of foot races to those pucks in the corners, and they've kind of taken more of a defensive posture where they're going to be more inclined to block shots and try and break up that cross-seam pass, because Vancouver's got a lot of high-end talent where if they can establish possession in the offensive zone, they're going to whip the puck around the perimeter, trying to manipulate that defense into a better position. And for all of their warts as a defense, the Oilers got some big boys back there. You know, Nurse is really big. Desharnais is very big. Ekholm is very good at blocking shots. You get that in conjunction with not having to play as much defense. That's the key for the Oilers. If they don't have to play a ton of defense, their defense is pretty good. It's when they're in their own zone for extended periods of time, that's where it kind of breaks down, because none of them are particularly fast other than Evan Bouchard. And when you lose those foot races consistently, it's hard to get in good positions. It's hard to maintain the defensive intensity you need to be successful for more than 30 to 40 seconds at a time, because it's just not physically feasible.
You mentioned Evan Bouchard. He has stood out at many points during this series. Talk to me about his game and its importance to the Oilers' success in both ends of the ice.
I would say Bouchard is probably their most important player that's not McDavid or Draisaitl, and that's not really saying a lot because the Oilers rely a lot on their big guys. You know, when you go look at like time on ice, the Oilers have 5 of the top 20 guys in time on ice. It's McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman, Bouchard, and then Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. They ask a lot from their guys, to their best players, to really carry a heavy load. Bouchard's great. His one flaw, he's not overly physical. He can get in trouble in his own zone because he's not going to win a lot of physical battles, but he's got really strong positioning. I would say that's probably his best trait, is that he generally is where he needs to be. And that sets up a lot of things, whether it's defensively and preventing offense from happening to begin with, or in the case of last night, you know, he's able to leak out where somebody's supposed to be marking him on the one-timer he ultimately scores on there. He has enough understanding of what's going on around him. And something else the Oilers do that I personally don't think a lot of teams do, And it's risky to overload it the way they do, but they play Bouchard with McDavid pretty much exclusively, where those two are going to be on the ice at the same time, and they're really going to try and tilt the ice in those limited minutes, those stretches where they're on the ice together. The defense has to respect McDavid, so that gives Bouchard a lot more room, and as we've seen, he's got a big shot.
Zach Hyman has played very well throughout these playoffs, been very productive. What has he done so successfully to get as many points and goals as he has?
I think he's got elite positioning, and I think he's really got a good understanding of how to play off of McDavid. That's the big thing. Everybody says, well, yeah, he rides shotgun with the best player in the world. Of course, he's going to put up points. We all made those jokes about Chris Kunitz all those years with Sid. It's the same principle, but Hyman is just better than Chris Kunitz ever was. I mean, Chris Kunitz never even sniffed 50 goals. Hyman's got elite positioning. He wins a lot of battles with his body, with his size. He out-leverages guys where he's willing to get low, engage with defensemen around the net front, and wait for the play to develop. And it's not easy. You know, that's the hardest space on the ice to occupy, right in front of the net, because you got the goalie bumping you from behind and you got defensemen bumping you from behind. So his positioning has been outstanding. And his ability to just kind of stick with it, where he's getting slashed, he's getting hooked, he's getting knocked down, but he stays with the play. I mean, the goal that he scored last night where Shilov's probably should have had it, he's getting cross-checked in the back as he's falling over, putting that shot on net. So that type of determinedness, that ruggedness, you add that to a reasonably high-end set of offensive skills and put him on a team where all he's got to do is get to his spot and then hit his shot. It's a really good combination. And it's not something I don't think anybody saw this caliber of player in Zach Hyman a couple years ago, but it's a testament to understanding what you might be able to do with somebody, and a really good reflection on the Oilers pro personnel people who saw somebody that he's got talent, but we think we could do more with this.
You talked about matchups and the importance of that last change. Obviously, in Game 7, the Oilers will not have that last change. What matchups do they look to set up, and what matchups do they look to avoid in Game 7?
See, it's an interesting question because the matchups the Oilers have wanted have worked for them at home, but in Vancouver, when they've gotten the matchups they like, it just hasn't worked to the same degree. And maybe it's just simply this is a weird series. These are two very close teams. It's hard to get a real good read on who's outplaying who. Like last night, I think JT Miller was on the ice for 2 goals against. The night before, they scored 2 goals for with him against McDavid. So I don't think there's a hard and fast, we want this versus that. I think the biggest thing for the Oilers is protecting the guys in the lineup where they can. That Nurse-Desharnais pair has been okay as the third pair because they don't play a ton of minutes. But in Vancouver, when they're not going to have the benefit of knowing who's going to be out there against them, that's a cause for concern. And then the bottom 6, you know, they've got talented players. Dylan Holloway's had a nice series. Corey Perry is still getting to the net front, still being annoying, but if those guys are out there against Pettersson and the Swedes line or against JT Miller, that's going to be a little bit of a harder matchup. So there's not exactly a stead, this is the matchup you want, because it's gone back and forth, because these teams are very close, just being frank.
So what is the key to winning Game 7?
Playing as little defense as possible. Do not make the difference in this game be Stuart Skinner, because you're probably not going to like that result. And Skinner is a young goalie. He is very up and down, and I think it's really just a reflection of confidence. They didn't ask him to do a lot last night. He was fine. He was more than adequate, ready for the moment. There's not a lot of games you're only going to have to make 15 saves in the NHL in today's game. It's just not a realistic strategy going forward. So minimize your defensive responsibility, and most importantly, make the Canucks play defense. The Oilers have gotten a lot of silly goals off of pucks deflecting off of people. Shilovs has all of 16, 17 games of NHL experience. Make their goalie be the difference, not yours. You put enough pressure on them, make Tyler Myers, make Ian Cole, make their questionable defensemen play defense as opposed to yours. That's the key for the Oilers. Minimize your risks. And I think the other thing is they're burning the candle at both ends very aggressively with their minutes allocations for a lot of these guys. They're going to have real issues if they win Game 7 into the next round, because some of these guys just physically aren't going to be able to hold up. I'll be very curious to see if we see Draisaitl and McDavid together for long stretches of this game, if it's close or if the Oilers are trailing. because that's generally been their fire extinguisher. If things are going bad, put your two best players on the ice and try and win those minutes at all costs.
Going to be an interesting Game 7. I know you will have the Oilers covered every step of the way in the playoffs and beyond. Nick, tell our listeners and our viewers where they could find the podcast and where they could find you on social media.
So Locked On Oilers, wherever you get your podcasts, over on YouTube, every day, Monday to Friday, on the weekends when there are games, on the weekends as well. Follow me on Twitter at Nick Zararis. Other than that, thanks for having me, Gil.
All right, Nick. Thanks. Always a pleasure. Today's episode is brought to you by Policygenius. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It saves you time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net starting today. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million worth of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policygenius helps you compare your options from top companies, and their team of licensed experts is on hand to help talk you through it. You can easily compare quotes from America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find your lowest price. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL or click in the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL, policygenius.com/LockedOnNHL.